Rhett, tenemos aquí un gran experto de temas de agua que podría ser más importante para el futuro de la humanidad. Un tema muy conectado también con el tema de cambio climático, seguro nos va a platicar cosas muy interesantes. Y bueno, este tema se ha involucrado en las controversias entre Estados Unidos y México últimamente, como casi todos los temas bajo el sol en la relación bilateral. Y yo soy Amy Glover, miembro de la Junta Directiva de COMEXI y dirijo la Unidad de Estudio y Reflexión de América del Norte y Estados Unidos. Entonces, bueno, es un gran honor contar con el doctor Rhett Larson. Él es profesor Richard Morrison de Derecho de Agua en la Facultad de Derecho Sandra de O'Connor de la Universidad Estatal de Arizona, ASU, y investigador principal en el Centro Kiel para Políticas de Agua. Sus áreas de especialización incluyen derecho de propiedad, derecho administrativo, derecho ambiental y de recursos naturales, con un enfoque particular en políticas hídricas nacionales e internacionales. También ha escrito sobre temas de Israel y Jordania, ¿no? Muy interesante. Su investigación se centra en el impacto de la innovación tecnológica en los derechos de agua, especialmente en contextos transfronterizos, y en la sostenibilidad del derecho humano al agua. Ha liderado proyectos financiados por USAID, en Líbano y Jordania, y colabora en la resolución de disputas sobre agua en Arizona y la cuenca del río Colorado. Ha sido profesor, visitante e investigador en universidades de Ecuador, Australia, Israel y autor del libro Just Add Water, que suena súper interesante. Previamente ejercitó el derecho ambiental y recursos naturales en firmas legales en Arizona. Así que, sin más, bienvenido y muchas gracias a todas y todos por acompañarnos en una tarde que parece que va a ser lluviosa. So I think we'll just switch to English and let Rhett give us his presentation about legal issues impacting the border between the U.S. and Mexico, and then we can jump into a conversation. I have several questions, and we can open up for the questions or comments that others might have. So I'll hand it over to you.
Hablando de la escasez de agua, me da sed.
Sí.
Bueno, todos me pueden escuchar, ¿está bien así?
Okay.
So, yo lo puedo hacer en inglés, pero we'll do it in English. So I'm from Yuma, Arizona, which you can see is right by San Luis Rio Colorado. So in Yuma, Arizona, that's where I grew up. In Yuma, when I grew up there, I thought there were only two kinds of jobs for adults. I thought all adults were either farmers or soldiers, because the area there is agricultural and there's a military base. And all of my friends' parents were farmers or soldiers, and my family worked in related fields, and those jobs really scared me. I thought they were terrifying. The only person I knew who was not either a farmer or a soldier was someone who went to our church, and he was our irrigation district's lawyer. And I thought, well, and he was this very eminent figure in the community, people really respected him, and I thought, well, that's the only job a grown-up can have that isn't scary, so I will have that job. So that's how I got interested. So people ask, how do you get interested in water law? You grow up in Yuma, Arizona, which is right where the Colorado River meets Sonora, Baja Norte, California, and Arizona. So that is the water at the border has been really my entire life. And as you can see, so we share multiple rivers between the United States and Mexico. We share the cuenca del Rio Colorado, and we share the cuenca of the Rio Bravo and the Rio Grande that makes up más de la mitad, more than half of the border And oftentimes we forget that we share a significant amount of groundwater that crosses the border. And we also share a portion of the Santa Cruz River, the San Pedro River, which originates in Cananea. And we share a lot of potable water, stormwater, and wastewater challenges as well. Just as a sort of notice, I was appointed by Governor Katie Hobbs, the governor of Arizona. I serve on the Arizona-Mexico Commission, where my work focuses on transboundary water issues, aguas transfronterizas. I'm also the general counsel for the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, which is a collection of 10 of the largest cities in central Arizona. I represent them as their attorney. So just everything that I'm going to be saying in this presentation is from my own perspective. I'm not speaking for my clients, nor am I speaking for the Hobbs administration, nor for the Arizona-Mexico Commission. So 3 main river basins shared between the United States and Mexico, Colorado. I am going to also talk about the San Pedro River, which you'll see originates in Cananea and flows northward, then is a tributary to the Gila River, which is then a tributary to the Rio Colorado. The Rio Grande, which also includes the Rio Bravo, and then the Rio Tijuana. And we'll talk some about groundwater, stormwater management. One of the most interesting and complex aspects about the relationship between the United States and Mexico is that unlike most other river basins, we are both upstream and downstream of each other. So Mexico is downstream of the United States on the Colorado River, but Mexico is upstream of the United States on the San Pedro and on the Rio Grande. And this is really unique. So the hydropolitics and the hydrodiplomacy of the Nile River Basin, for example, is very different because the Nile flows. Every single country just lines up along the Nile. We, between the United States and Mexico, are very different because we're both upstream and downstream of each other. In water law, one of the things that we say a lot is it's better to be upstream with a shovel than downstream with a right. Better to be up in the mountains and be able to build your own dams and dig your own canals than it is to be at the bottom and tell everybody that the law says you have a right to water. Both the United States and Mexico face that challenge with each other. The United States will often, and including in recent years, not comply with treaty obligations on the Colorado River and deliver water Mexico is owed under treaty because Mexico is downstream, and Mexico will violate its treaty obligations because it is upstream on the Rio Grande. And so these are challenges that we sort of share between one another. I'm just going to try and keep the presentation brief so that we can have a good formal conversation. The Colorado River. So the Colorado River was not a challenge really until around the 1920s when there was a significant amount of controversy over sharing the river. 7 US states share the Colorado River. So Wyoming, Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California all share the Colorado River. Additionally, 33 Native American tribes share the Colorado River. So shared between 2 countries, including 2 Mexican states, 33 sovereign tribal nations in the United States, and 7 states. If you imagine the world as like a pelota de golf, it's like a golf ball, it's covered in divots. So it's una esfera, and every divot is like a cuenca, a river basin, into which all water flows to a common point. A sensible person would draw all jurisdictional boundaries to correspond to the cuenca, to the river basin. When you split the cuenca into different jurisdictions, you're inviting conflict. And that's what we did. We split the Colorado River into different states, and we are split into different countries. The more that we envision ourselves as citizens of a river basin and not as citizens of different states or different countries, the closer we get to real effective water management. So the appropriate scale of water politics is the scale of the cuenca, of the river basin. Now, in the early part of the 1920s, as there was mass urbanization and as California was beginning to take an enormous amount of water from the river, there was a lot of concern that California would use the entirety of the river. So there was an agreement between the 7 states that they would split the river in half. One half of the river would go to the upper basin, Colorado, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming, and half of the river would go to the lower basin, Arizona, Nevada, and California, with no consideration for the rights of Mexico at all, and no consideration for the rights of Native American tribes, only factoring in those 7 states. And doing something very simple and very stupid, and that was doing something like King Solomon and splitting the baby in half. Now, this is not the best map, so we'll go backwards. So if we go to the Colorado River Basin, you can see that line there that splits the upper basin and the lower basin. The conflict in the United States right now is very much between those 2 basins, those 2 cuencas. Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, New Mexico, they hate Arizona, California, and Nevada. Which is a big change, because it used to be everyone hates California. For years, I would tell people that the state of Arizona has a much closer hydrodiplomatic relationship to Sonora than we do to California. Sonora is a much closer friend to Arizona than the state of California is, and historically has been. Now, the politics have shifted really in about the last 8 months, so that now the conflict inside of the United States is very much upper basin against lower basin. We are moving, perhaps very gradually, towards a possible consensus on how to manage the river, but the failure to do so will lead to massive litigation. We will all sue each other. In the United States, when 2 states sue each other, it goes straight to the United States Supreme Court with no appeal. The United States Supreme Court is terrible at water law. Bless their hearts, I'm sure they're very good at little things, but big important things like water, they just don't understand very well. Of the 9 justices on the US Supreme Court, only 1 has ever lived west of the Mississippi. And so they don't know very much about the West. They don't understand our culture, they don't understand our water challenges, they don't understand the nature of living alongside sovereign tribal nations, and so they tend to get water law wrong. In 1922, we had the compact. The compact assumes that 7.5 million acre feet will go to the upper basin, 7.5 to the lower basin. In 1944, we reached the Rivers Agreement with Mexico. Why 1944? Because we wanted a secure ally to our south during World War II. Before that, the United States recognized that something called the Harmon Doctrine. The Harmon Doctrine was a belief that had been put forward by a US Attorney General that said that all water inside of the United States belongs to the United States and we owe Mexico nothing. Which of course, Mexico could just as easily respond, oh fantastic, then you will cheat us on the Colorado River and we will cheat you on the Rio Grande, which is a terrible way to be neighbors. So, because we needed a secure neighbor to our south, we agreed to the 1944 Rivers Treaty, which established SILA, the Comisión Internacional de Límites en Agua, or what we call the IBWC in the United States, the International Boundaries of Waters Commission. Each is represented by an individual commissioner. Those individual commissioners can agree to minutes that amend the treaty, which makes it a very flexible, adaptive governance approach. In 1944, Mexico was guaranteed 1.5 million acre feet. Now I'm going to say acre foot a lot. An acre foot is 1,233 cubic meters. Why does the United States use acre foot? Because we like to come up with the most ridiculous possible way to measure things. Why, I don't know. We just, whatever's the least scientific way to measure something, that's what the United States is doing. So we have something called acre foot. Don't ask me why, just to frustrate people. So 7.5 million acre feet to the upper basin, 7.5 million acre feet to the lower basin. 1944, we agree to 1.5 million acre feet owed to Mexico. And then every year we lose about 1.5 million acre feet to evapotranspiration. About 1.5 million acre feet just flies away. Add it all together, we assume every year in the river that there's 18 million acre feet. We know from tree ring analysis that the average amount of water over 1,000 years in the river is about 13.5 million acre feet. So even if there was no such thing as climate change, the river is bankrupt. The river owes more water than it can almost ever pay out in a normal year. Now, Climate change makes this problem much worse. What happens with climate change is we are seeing more frequent, more intense El Nino years. So El Nino is a climate pattern that is an abnormal warming of the Pacific Ocean. That usually means wetter winters for us in the Colorado River Basin, which you would think is good. More snow in the mountains means more water in the river. The problem is that we're still getting a lot of snow. It's just that we get it very quickly and in a short period of time, and our air is so hot and dry that we will get 110% of our normal snow, but only 30% will ever reach the river because it is so hot and our soils and air are so dry. So we're now having conversations about a 10 million acre foot river, a 9 million acre foot river. How do we begin to share a river that was already bankrupt? How do we begin to share it? Now, in 1974, Mexico protested against the United States under the treaty, saying that the water that was being delivered to them was too salty, that it was poisoning crops in Sonora and in Baja Norte. Now, in 1974, it was the OPEC embargo, and so we needed a neighbor to our south that could deliver oil. So the United States agreed to deliver cleaner water on the Colorado River. So the Colorado River begins in its headwaters in the Rocky Mountains at about 250 parts per million salinity. When it crosses the US-Mexico border, it's more like seawater. That's how salty it is. And it's poisonous to crops. So Mexican farmers protested and said, you have to deliver us water that's usable. The United States passed the Salinity Control Act in 1974, saying that we would build a desalination plant in Yuma, my old hometown, to desalinate, to take the salt out of the Colorado River. That plant is so expensive that we've only turned it on 4 times. We do not use it. What do we do to comply with our treaty obligation instead? We have built interceptor ditches that intercept all of the salty water coming off of US farms, and we divert that salty water to the Cienega de la Santa Clara wetlands near the delta of the Colorado River. It is about 113,000 acre feet worth of water. If we stop delivering it to the wetland will die. And it's a Ramsar protected international wetland. If we desalinate the water, it will cost us a lot of money, but we can possibly get our hands on 113,000 acre feet of water. What do? There isn't a good answer to that question right now. Somebody's going to get hurt. Now, the All-American Canal, which is the canal that takes water from the Colorado River into the Imperial Irrigation District in Southern California, that canal was a dirt canal for many decades. And because it was moving a lot of water with a dirt canal, the water would seep into the ground and feed farms in Baja Norte and Sonora. In the 1980s, the Imperial Irrigation District lined the canal, so there was no more water that was seeping into the ground and feeding Mexican farms. So a lot of Mexican farmers in Baja Norte and in Sonora lost access to groundwater that had been percolating from the delivery of this canal. In Minute 319, which was in 2012, we agreed to the Flujo Pulso, or the pulse flow. This was the first time our 2 countries had agreed to deliver water only for environmental purposes. We released water from Morelos Dam near the border solely for the restoration of the Colorado River Delta. A lot of people said this was stupid, that there was no way that this was going to restore nature, that we had killed Mother Nature and the Delta was dead, and it was a miracle. If you give Mother Nature just a little bit of a chance, she can do amazing things. If you give her a little bit of space. And so the Delta came back to life, and you saw cottonwoods, and you saw beavers, and you saw a lot of returning ecosystems. But we have so far not been able to come up with a sustainable, long-term approach to restoring the Colorado River Delta and its ecosystem. In Minute 323, we agreed to a shortage sharing regime between the United States and Mexico. As the United States faces shortage, as we cut certain users, Mexico has agreed to also take less than its 1.5 million acre feet. What's the trade? The trade is the United States paid to rehabilitate certain Mexican water infrastructure, canals in Sonora and Baja Norte, and the United States agreed to store some Mexican Colorado River water behind our dams in exchange for Mexico agreeing to take less water during shortage declarations. This has been a critical part of our relationship. The flujo pulso, the pulse flow, and the shortage sharing agreements were critical ways for us to manage this. One of my frustrations with a lot of discussions right now in the United States about the binational relationship between the United States and Mexico is when we simplify the relationship between the two countries to not account for these water issues, because Mexico has been an absolutely essential partner to effectively managing and adapting to the changing river. Maintaining a good, strong working relationship with our Mexican partners is critical to be able to adapt to a dynamic river system. Mexico now, under Minute 330, can engage in what's called the Mexican Water Reserve, which is Mexico will receive money in exchange for storing more water behind US dams. So Mexico can now agree to basically bank its water and then store it, receive money, and then later call on the water. This is something that also exists in the United States. It's called Intentionally Created Surplus, or ICS. This intentionally created surplus allows farmers or Indian tribes to leave water in the reservoir, bank it, get paid for not using water, and then later take the water out of the reservoir. This has become extremely controversial because people who think they're owed water in the reservoir, as the reservoir fills up with nations and tribes and farmers who have their name on the water, at some point someone who goes, well, I thought I was owed water out of that river, but now all the water in the embalse is claimed. It all has a name on it, so we can't get any water. It's become extremely, extremely controversial. A lot of people, especially in the United States right now, say, well, the answer is build a desalination plant in Mexico. Why don't we go to Puerto Peñasco, build a desalination plant, desalinate ocean water in Mexico, and then pump that all the way to the United States of America. We can talk about why that's not a good idea. But we can also talk about why the role of desalination may still have a future in the way that our two nations manage the river basin. And we can leave that more for questions later. But there was a major controversy. An Israeli company called IDE came in and said, well, we will take money that had been set aside to the Arizona Water Infrastructure Finance Authority, which I serve on. We will take money that had been set aside there, $1 billion, and we will build a desalination plant in Puerto Peñasco. And then we'll build a giant pipeline all the way to Phoenix, Arizona. There were a lot of protests, as you can imagine. That pipeline, first of all, building a desalination plant in Mexico and no one in Mexico gets the water. And then a giant pipeline that goes through a bunch of critical habitat, Native American tribes, national parks, and the water would be extremely expensive. Right now, the status of negotiations between all of these parties has been extremely litigious and controversial. Arizona, California, and Nevada have put forward a proposal. The Upper Basin states have put forward an alternative proposal. When the Trump administration took over, the Trump administration only within the last few weeks has appointed a commissioner of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which is the agency that manages the river. My personal opinion is that the federal government needs to turn itself into the bad guy. The federal government needs to threaten the states with unilateral action if we don't come up with a consensus agreement. Because the states right now hate each other, we need to hate the federal government. If we hate the federal government, we'll unite and come up with our own plan. Otherwise, I sort of say it's a little bit like Mother Nature is mom and the federal government is dad. We've been surviving now for a while because mom has been very nice in giving us water, and dad has been very nice in giving us money. But right now, mom is really sick in bed and can't get out of bed. And dad is something else. So you can see why with dad not being a reliable partner and mom not being a reliable partner, the kids need to get together and come up with a solution. And so every jurisdiction that shares the Colorado River Basin, all 7 states, all 33 tribes, both Sonora and Baja California, both the federal US government and the national federal government of the Republic of Mexico, we need to come together and find a better solution than endless litigation, which I'm afraid is where we're heading if we don't find something better. The San Pedro River, I will go through these very quickly. They're perhaps less significant. The San Pedro begins in Cananea and flows north. This has been a really controversial river in Arizona. There are lots of lawsuits over the San Pedro River because it flows through a border, it flows through a military base, Fort Huachuca. It also flows through critically protected habitat, and it also provides water to a nearby town, Sierra Vista, that is in desperate need of the water. One of the challenges has been that the Trump administration has said, well, why don't we just make the entire frontera, the entire border, part of Fort Huachuca, make it all a military base. So the entire border would be militarized. If the entire border were militarized, it would mean the Roosevelt line, which is a 60-meter line all the way around the border, would then become part of a military base, Fort Huachuca. Now, there are all kinds of immigration, national security consequences to this, but there are huge consequences for water, because a military base is guaranteed a certain amount of water. And what if the United States massively expanded the size of Fort Huachuca? That's one of the things they're talking about. It would have huge implications for everyone else who shares the San Pedro River, including copper mining operations in Cananea. One of the things we've been trying to do is to recharge aquifers from Sierra Vista, which is the town right next to San Pedro. We take their wastewater, recharge the groundwater to maintain the flow in the San Pedro River. This has been one of our creative approaches to try and maintain the flow of the river. The Ambos Nogales situation. So Ambos Nogales, there's Nogales in Santa Cruz County and Nogales in Sonora. There we have what's called the International Outfall Interceptor that takes stormwater and wastewater from the Sonoran side and from the Arizona side, and takes that stormwater and wastewater, diverts it to Rio Rico, to the binational wastewater treatment plant that is now owned and operated by SILA, by the IBWC, for treatment. This pipeline has been in disrepair for a long time. It's caused a lot of challenges because it's been damaged by flooding. It's needed repairs and maintenance to be able to prevent contamination and to prevent it from being a method for moving drugs and weapons. It's been repaired in recent years. Now the question is, there's lots of fights about who gets access to the wastewater. Should the wastewater be moved back to Nogales in Sonora? Should some portion of the wastewater stay in Nogales in Arizona? Should some portion of the wastewater go to mining operations that want to buy it? You can see the challenges associated with the value of wastewater. And do we use it to recharge aquifers in the region? Then there's the challenge between Douglas, Arizona and Agua Prieta in Sonora. So Douglas and Agua Prieta are hermanas, they share the border right there. Douglas recently voted to actively manage its groundwater. It's rapidly losing groundwater. Those same challenges are facing Agua Prieta. Agua Prieta, one possible conversation that we're having is, what about addressing non-revenue water? So water, agua sea integrado sin impuestos. If we address leaks in the drinking water system in Agua Prieta, can Agua Prieta generate credits that it can then sell to Douglas, Arizona for more groundwater extraction? It's a way to create financial incentives for Agua Prieta to fix leaking infrastructure, and a way to address groundwater levels falling in Douglas, but it may also facilitate more unsustainable groundwater practices. On the Rio Grande, this has been probably the most controversial one in recent years. Donald Trump threatened and said, we will not deliver on the Colorado River if Mexico does not deliver on the Rio Grande. Mexico has been falling behind for several years. It owes about 350,000 acre feet every year, or 1.75 million acre feet every 5 years, to Texas farmers on the Rio Grande. It had been falling behind in its deliveries, and Donald Trump came in and said, well, we will not deliver Mexico the water it is owed on the Colorado River. If Mexico does not deliver the water we are owed to Texas on the Rio Grande. I'm skeptical of the wisdom of combining the management of those two rivers. They're two very different rivers with very different challenges, and to assume that you can hold one hostage for the management of the other is a little bit dangerous. But there are challenges. The main reason Mexico has not been delivering the treaty owed amount is drought, sequía, here in Mexico. And when Mexico has attempted to comply with its treaty obligations, it has released water either from the Presa Boquilla near Chihuahua, which is where my grandmother's from, or from the Presa Amistad. When it's done that, it's resulted in water shortages to Mexican farmers and Mexican communities, including a massive water shortage to the Ciudad Monterrey, and water shortages that resulted in very dangerous protests in and around Chihuahua. Fortunately, both US and Mexico came to an agreement just within the last 2 months for Mexico to deliver water on the Rio Grande, or the United States will meet its treaty obligations on the Colorado River. But this is going to remain a challenge. In fact, Texas farmers had sought to sue Mexico under our treaty agreement, and had asked Arizona and California farmers to join the lawsuit. And Arizona and California said, we don't want to join the lawsuit because you know how Mexico is not delivering you guys the water you're owed? We don't deliver Mexico the water they're owed. So if you win in this lawsuit against Mexico, Mexico will win in a lawsuit against us. So we don't want to get involved. So you can see the challenges of this. It's impacting the way that water is being used in Texas. You're seeing less growth of cotton, less growth of sugar and rice. But of course, a lot of the response is maybe you shouldn't be growing sugar and cotton and rice in the desert. And then the last one we can talk about is mainly not so much a water supply issue as a water contamination issue. This has been a long-standing challenge with water contamination flowing northward from the Tijuana River in Baja Norte, north into San Diego. The challenges are complex here, both because a lot of the raw sewage discharges into the Tijuana River, they are coming from municipalities, they are coming from the municipality in Tijuana, but they're also coming from empresas and maquiladoras that are from Korea and Taiwan. And so it's a multinational problem. It's not just a binational US-Mexico problem. It's a complex problem because it's not just municipal raw sewage, it's industrial wastewater coming from maquiladoras and empresas that are from East Asia. And so how do we address what is a very dangerous water contamination problem? How do we address it in a way that's sort of long-term, collaborative, and that integrates all of the interests of multiple countries in the region? But I will leave that there for a conversation. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. This is definitely an interesting topic with a lot of different complexities. I was wondering, you mentioned the IWC or SILA in terms of their role in managing these issues. How good is their management from a scientific point of view, or how politicized has it become? And the reason I ask that is the relationship is based on a treaty from 1944. I think a variety of people have suggested it should be updated. However, from a Mexican perspective, it doesn't seem like a great time to do any updating of absolutely anything with the United States of America, precisely because Daddy has lost his mind. What are your thoughts as an expert? From what I understand too, it is very much seen from a federal point of view. Mexican farmers are suffering a lot. I think the Mexican federal government prioritized fear related to the US federal government and kind of said, okay, well, we'll be taking this water, so the Mexican farmers lost out. I mean, what are your thoughts on the is this going to be politicized, or does this body look at it from a more collegial and scientific point of view?
Historically, I think there's a lot to be proud of about how SILA and the SILA/IBWC have managed the rivers together. The regular updating of minutes, the shortage sharing agreements, the flujo pulso, this is evidence of the value of friendship. If you'll talk to the people who negotiated Minute 312 and the flujo pulso, they'll talk about how close the friendship was between the people that were negotiating. And you can never underestimate the value of collegiality and friendship when it comes to effective treaty negotiations. And I think that we have been really good neighbors and partners in managing the rivers because we've been good friends. with that. And scientifically, I think it's been pretty well grounded. Many of the commissioners from both sides of the border have been engineers and scientists. The current commissioner of SELA is an engineer with over 20 years of experience. So the Mexican commissioner, she has over 20 years of experience. She's been the commissioner since 2021. She's a technical expert. Chad McIntosh, who's the commissioner on the US side, he has over 40 years of experience. He worked with Ford Motor Company for a while. He was a deputy director of the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. He worked for the US federal government's EPA in its Office of Tribal and International Affairs, and is both a registered engineer and an attorney. I'm optimistic that the relationship that has carried us up to this point will remain, but when there's one representative from each side, it's so easy to politicize that. And it's so easy to turn it into an adversarial relationship instead of a collaborative one. And I'm afraid that a lot of the rhetoric, especially the rhetoric that has come out over the Rio Grande issues, is one that's not conciliatory and collaborative. And if this is going to be the nature, and we're going to have people who want to echo that sentiment put into commissioner positions within SELA IBWC, it's going to frustrate the ways that we adapt in the future. And adaptation, particularly if we are not going to renegotiate the 1944 treaty, and I agree with you, I don't see that happening anytime soon, then what we need are these minutes. We need to be able to rapidly adapt to a rapidly changing river, and these minutes allow us to do that, but we won't be able to rapidly adapt if we don't maintain that same kind of collegial and scientifically bound relationship.
Sure. Well, I'm going to take advantage and ask one more question, and then we'll open it up. In order to encourage collaboration, the idea of creating new water resources is a good idea. And maybe if you could talk to some of the options, desalinization being one, if you could talk about why that's not a good idea, and if it's not a good idea, what are the options there might be to kind of come up with ideas, given the fact that there's this whole context of climate change, which is not going away, and which it would be interesting to hear from you. I mean, the President of the United States doesn't seem to believe this is a problem, contrary to everybody else in the world and scientific information. So, what do we do with that? Like, okay, new water resources, what could we do, and could this be a solution we could work towards?
Mm-hmm. So, no one who works in water doesn't believe in climate change. Everyone in the water sector believes in climate change. You see it every day, you feel it every day. The climate change is real, it's a real challenge. The only people who don't believe in climate change are people who have the luxury of saying political things but don't have to live with it every day. Now, I'm a dad, I'm a father, I have 4 kids, and my children will fight over food sometimes. I'll open a bag of chips or a box of cookies for my kids, and they will fight. And their fight sounds like a water fight. One will go, I'm the biggest, so I should get the most. One will go, I'm the oldest, so I should get the most. One will go, I'm the smallest, so I'm growing, so I need the most. One will go, I got here first, so I need the most. One will go, I'm the middle kid and no one ever pays attention to me anyway, so I should get the most. And that is what a water fight sounds like. That is exactly what a water fight sounds like. The challenge is that sometimes what my children are fighting about is chips and cookies, but sometimes chips and cookies are just a symbol of a bigger, deeper fight. They're fighting for recognition. They're fighting for respect. They're fighting to be seen and to be valued. That is true in water. When jurisdictions fight over water, sometimes they're just fighting over water. And when that's true, it's actually pretty straightforward to fix the fight. Just find a way to pipe the water the right way and kind of find an engineering solution. But when water becomes a symbol of sovereignty, when it becomes a symbol of respect, then the water fight gets really complicated. It's much more difficult. And I know the temptation when my children fight over food, I know the temptation to say, why don't I just open another bag of chips or open another box of cookies? But if they're not really fighting over cookies, more isn't going to fix the problem. And so when the different jurisdictions that share these river basins, we need to ask ourselves, are we only fighting over water? Or is water the symbol of something deeper? Are we fighting over respect, recognition, being valued, being appreciated? If that's true, then augmenting the supply isn't going to solve our problem. Now, my personal opinion is there is a bright future for desalination between the United States and Mexico. It will play a part of our relationship in the future. But we need to set different priorities. The first and most important priority in water policy is to understand your water. We need better monitoring, we need better modeling, we need better data sharing. How can we expect to manage something effectively and sustainably if we don't understand it? So number one, understand your water. Number two, conserve your water. A 9% reduction in agricultural water use in the Colorado River Basin doubles the amount of water available for everyone else. So if we find more efficient ways to irrigate our crops and conserve water, there's a bright future of more water being available. The last priority is to augment your supply. Now, some people will say, well, why don't you just pipe water from where it is to where it isn't? People will go, well, we do that with oil. Oil is in one place, it's not in another place, so we just build a big oil pipeline. Why don't we just do that with water? And I tell people, but you can do that with water as soon as people want to pay the price for water that they pay for oil. The problem with water is that water's heavy. And if you think water should be free, my answer to you is, it is free. Go get a bucket, go to a river, fill your bucket, walk all the way home, boil your bucket until it's clean, and when you're done doing that, you'll know why somebody charges you for water. So when I worked in Ecuador, I had someone who ran one of the utilities there, and he would say, "El agua es un don de Dios, pero tubos no." Ingenieros no. Like, water is a gift from God, but pipes and wells and engineers aren't. We have to pay for it. And if we're going to move water from one place, clean it, and move it all the way to another place that's far away, there has to be a market for water that expensive at the end of the pipe. And right now, that market's not there. That market could be there someday. We could get that desperate. What do I think we should do? Mexico is already investing in developing desalination. You're seeing desalination plants in Cabo and more of its resort communities. I believe Mexico will build a desalination plant in Puerto Peñasco. It would be short-sighted of the United States to not approach the Mexican government and say, if you're going to build a desalination plant in Puerto Peñasco, what can we do to help? Now, back in the 1980s, desalination was only engaged in by countries that were very energy rich and very water poor, like Gulf states, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. Because they had a lot of energy to burn to turn seawater into fresh water, and they didn't have any fresh water. Back then, you could generate a single cubic meter of fresh water from seawater using about 35 kilowatts of electricity. Now, the best systems in the world, the best desalination plants in the world, like the Ashkelon system in Israel, the Llobregat system in Spain, the Xiamen system in China, the Carlsbad system in California, these systems can produce water at 2.5 kilowatts. That's how far the technology's come. But even with the technology coming that far, the water, and the way that you do this is you have to co-locate the desalination plant next to wastewater treatment so that it can receive the wastewater from the desal plant, and next to power generation so you cut down your transmission loss and your energy costs. And you have to integrate it with a system that recycles pressure from the waste stream to the production stream, and you have to install photovoltaic solar panels. If you do all of that, you can get a really efficient desal plant. But even then, the cost of that water is about $3,000 an acre foot. There is growing market for $3,000 an acre foot water in the United States of America, but not if we pipe it all the way to the United States of America. Then it'll be too expensive. What I think we should do, I think the United States should go to the Mexican government and say, if you want to build a desalination plant in Puerto Peñasco, let's help you co-locate it with power generation and wastewater treatment so that we get the most efficient plant we possibly can. it could produce 300,000 acre-feet of water for Mexicans in and around Puerto Peñasco in Baja Norte and in Sonora. In exchange, Mexico would allow Arizona to take a portion of its 1.5 million acre-foot water from the Colorado River and deliver it to Arizona. Then we don't need a big pipeline from Mexico to Arizona. Mexicans benefit from a super advanced, efficient desalination plant, and Arizona farmers can get a cut of Mexican water that would have been delivered on the Colorado River. Even if I'm right, we are 30 years and billions of dollars away from that right now. So while I think it's a good idea and we should start talking about it now to make it happen, there's a whole lot that we need to do before it'll ever come into fruition.
That's very, very interesting. Well, I want to open up the floor y podemos hablar en español. Fue así como una decisión al azar hablar en inglés, pero siéntense en la libertad de hacer la pregunta en español. Y aquí tenemos micrófonos. ¿Alguien quisiera? Aquí y una mano ahí para 3 personas. A lo mejor podemos escuchar las preguntas y luego responder.
Muchas gracias, muy interesante. Yo trabajo en una empresa en la que actualmente estamos participando en las alternativas de solución para la desaladora de Rosarito en Tijuana, que va a ser de 2.400 litros por segundo, 2.4 metros cúbicos. Pero un tema importante con la Semarnat ha sido el tema de la salmuera. Tú que hablas de la desalinización en Puerto Peñasco, que para mí también es una solución en la frontera norte, porque en realidad ya no hay muchas opciones para el agua, ¿qué recomendarías? ¿Qué opinas de la salmuera?
Pues las plantas de desalinización en Israel dicen que no es un problema, pero yo no sé si es un verdadero. Lo que podemos hacer es colocar la planta de desalinización con una planta de aguas residuales para recibir las aguas residuales de la planta de desalinización. Pero hay otra cosa que podemos hacer. Pues ya no lo puede ver muy bien, pero en el sur de California hay un lago que se llama es el Mar Saltón, que es una depresión en la tierra que ha recibido aguas de las granjas alrededor por décadas y décadas, y se llenó de agua salada. Pero después de algunos años de los granjeros con sus operaciones más eficaces, ya hay una sequía en el lago, en el Mar Saltón. Y los depósitos del mar son tóxicos. Y muchos de los niños en el área se están poniendo enfermos. Entonces, ¿qué podemos hacer? Lo que podemos hacer es utilizar las aguas residuales de las plantas de desalinización en México para rellenar el Mar Saltón, para proteger a los niños allí. Pero esto sería caro, transportar estas aguas residuales hasta allá, pero si lo hacemos una parte importante de proteger la salud de los niños allí, y también encontrar una forma de no descargar estos rechazos al mar y tener problemas del medio ambiente.
Gracias.
Muy bien, creo que...
Gracias. Toño Benítez, Facultad de Derecho de la UNAM. Enhorabuena por el evento. En el momento que hablan respecto a esta relación tóxica, mejor analogía no puede darse. Temas técnicos, teoría de la regulación, creo que es el gran elefante blanco en la mesa. Desde el ámbito académico, ¿qué estamos haciendo? ¿Qué se puede hacer justamente para esta diplomacia hídrica? Sabiendo que en México hemos tenido un tránsito en Poder Judicial, donde se supone, o nos han dicho, que ahora las comunidades, pueblos originarios, van a tener impartición de justicia pronta y expedita. No obstante, los fallos judiciales norteamericanos en derecho al agua no son controversiales. Gracias.
Pues
Es un elefante blanco.
sí.
Es un elefante blanco, lo sé.
Pues los dos sistemas de los Estados Unidos y de México son muy diferentes, porque el sistema en México de la gestión de agua es muy centralizado. Con Agua y Semarnat tienen todo el control. Y eso resulta en algunos desafíos y dificultades para la gestión de agua, porque hay muchas comunidades, aún aquí en México, incluyendo algunos ejidos que están por la frontera, que siempre se sienten como si están luchando contra Conagua y Semarnat. Pero el reverso existe en los Estados Unidos, porque el poder es muy descentralizado, porque los estados tienen todo el poder y los tribus de los indios, de los pueblos indígenas, ellos tienen poder porque tienen prioridades en el agua muy alta, porque ellos tienen porque la prioridad de recibir concesiones de agua en los Estados Unidos, por lo menos en el oeste de los Estados Unidos, se basa en el tiempo. El que viene primero tiene la primera prioridad en el agua. ¿Y quién llegó primero? Los pueblos indígenas. Entonces, de cómo es que podemos juntar un sistema muy centralizado y un sistema muy descentralizado. Lo podemos hacer dentro de SILA, pero hemos luchado por hacer esto. ¿Qué podemos hacer como académicos? Lo más importante que nosotros podemos hacer es de entender el agua mejor, es de enfocarnos en compartir la información y de mejorar nuestros modelos para poder compartir estos modelos y tener un intercambio de investigaciones y tener un intercambio de información en que los pueblos que quizás no tienen mucho poder aquí en México por el poder de Conagua, por lo menos tienen acceso a la información. Para mí, yo tengo mucho interés en la opinión de ustedes en el futuro por el cambio del sistema judicial que va a resultar de eso, porque yo estaba hay muchas personas en el mundo que siempre están diciendo a Arizona y a Sonora y a Baja Norte, ¿por qué ustedes no pueden ser más como Israel? ¿Por qué ustedes no pueden ser más como Australia? Ustedes tienen que ser más como Australia e Israel. Y yo siempre digo, porque no lo somos. Israel es un país es un país muy pequeño, es un país con toda la población cerca al mar, a la orilla del mar, entonces pueden desarrollar la desalinización allá, y es un país en que el gobierno es el dueño de todo el agua. Los sistemas que tenemos en Sonora, en Baja Norte y en Arizona son completamente diferentes. Entonces, gritando a Arizona y a Sonora, ¿por qué ustedes no pueden ser como Israel? ¿Por qué no pueden ser como Australia? Es como gritar a su perro. ¿Por qué tú no puedes ser más como un pájaro? Somos completamente diferentes. Entonces, yo tengo mucho interés en la opinión de ustedes, lo que va a pasar, porque en Australia ellos siempre me están diciendo, si ustedes se cambien como a llegar a ser más como Australia, todas las demandas sobre el agua se van a desaparecer. Y yo digo, ¿ustedes han conocido a un americano? ¿Alguien de los Estados Unidos? Nosotros vamos a hacer demandas como quieran.
Sí.
Somos un pueblo muy litigio. Sí. Y así que vamos a hacer las demandas. Aunque nosotros cambiemos el sistema entero de los derechos de agua, todavía van a llegar en una corte, como quiera. Yo no sé si eso existe aquí o en Sonora, o si eso se va a cambiar con las reformas al sistema judicial. Yo no sé.
Yo creo que ustedes tienen que hacer un estudio juntos, UNAM, ASU, y que podrían desarrollar esta idea de Peñasco como una idea de futuro, porque si a lo mejor va a tardar 30 años, pues hay que empezar hoy, ¿no? Pero sí. Entonces ustedes, por favor,
sí, acepto.
Sí. Hecho. Muy bien, creo que habían más manos, dos más. Si quieren, ¿por qué no vamos seguiditos con las preguntas y luego...
Sin micrófono. Sin micrófono está bien. Hola, me llamo Kenjiro Juárez, soy director de desarrollo de negocios en la Embajada de Israel aquí en México. Entonces pues conozco bastante de los sectores. Yo he trabajado ya con Chihuahua, con Nuevo León, con Baja California para los temas de desalación. Uno de los principales retos, más allá de que la energía también es el huachicol de agua y también la infraestructura. Creo que si bien la desalación sí es un proceso interesante, no es una solución holística. En México tenemos fugas, el consumo propio del agua. Mi pregunta está un poco más encaminada a que estamos trabajando con el Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo para poner inteligencia artificial y detectar fugas, para encontrar soluciones entre los ríos operadores de agua. Pero también, por ejemplo, con Chihuahua lo que estamos haciendo es que las unidades de riego puedan utilizar agua tratada para su uso, que es el principal problema con el río Conchos. Porque pues, la ley mexicana dice que pueden sustraer agua del pozo sin tener que pagar nada, dentro de un año tendrán que hacer una regulación para la parte de volúmenes de puntos. En Estados Unidos, en los estados que ustedes conocen, ¿cómo ha funcionado eso, detectar en qué se consume el agua y cómo utilizarlo de otra manera o reutilizarlo? Porque como bien dices, en Chihuahua no va a llevar una desaladora, o sea, no va a llegar hasta ahí. El 85% de agua se utiliza a través de la agricultura, por riego por inundación, que son campos y hectáreas de 2 metros de inundación de agua, 1 metro de inundación de agua, es demasiado. Si estoy utilizando agua gris de las industrias de Ciudad Juárez o de Delicias, entre otras. En su caso, ¿cuáles son esas soluciones? Porque el agua no va a llegar 500 kilómetros
Claro.
o 1000 kilómetros adentro. ¿Cuáles son las respuestas que están utilizando y los volúmenes, más o menos?
Pues en la ciudad de Phoenix, en Arizona, nosotros reciclamos casi 93% de todas las aguas residuales.
Sí.
Pero en Arizona y de verdad en todas partes de la cuenca del río Colorado tenemos algo muy semejante al estado de Chihuahua, porque depende del lugar, 75 hasta 80% de las aguas se utilizan en riego. Entonces, no podemos encontrar una solución a la escasez de agua sin enfocarnos en la agricultura. Y podemos utilizar aguas residuales en riego. Pero en Arizona la mayoría de las aguas recicladas se utilizan para, ¿cómo se dice? Enfriar, to cool. Para enfriar las plantas de energía y los centros de datos y en la producción de semiconductores. Son semiconductores. Entonces, si nosotros podemos encontrar una manera de enfriar los centros de datos y la producción de microchips y de semiconductores en una manera más eficaz que no utiliza agua, podemos utilizar las aguas recicladas más en el riego. Entonces, para mí, lo que nosotros necesitamos hacer, aún en la megaregión de la frontera, en Chihuahua, en Baja Norte, en Sonora, en Arizona, en Texas, en el sur de California, lo que nosotros necesitamos es, si nosotros queremos producir más semiconductores en esta región, megaregión, nosotros todos necesitamos hacer inversiones en una manera más eficaz de enfriar los centros de datos y la producción de semiconductores, porque de esa manera podemos utilizar las aguas recicladas en vez de en estos procesos industriales, podemos utilizarnos más en la producción agricultural y así podemos conservar más agua por medio de un sistema más eficaz en la producción de semiconductores.
Okay. Ustedes son los hermanos de seguimiento. En las universidades de estos estados hay, no sé, hubs de estudiantes que están buscando tecnología para desarrollar esto. ¿Hay un financiamiento o algo de parte de los estados para más o menos que estas empresas o startups
Hay
¿Quiénes
una-
podría desarrollar entonces eficiencias tecnológicas para sus centros de datos y entrenamiento?
Sí,
¿O cuál ha sido la conversación alrededor de eso?
la mayoría de los esfuerzos en esto se encuentra en el sector privado. So, por ejemplo, hay una empresa que se llama Forced Physics Dynamic, que tiene una tecnología muy interesante que no utiliza agua para enfriar los centros de datos. Pero lo que nosotros necesitamos es un esfuerzo colaboratorio entre México y los Estados Unidos y entre los estados que comparten la frontera en enfocarnos en el desarrollo de esa tecnología, porque podemos avanzarnos más en la producción de comida si nosotros no utilizamos tanta agua en la producción de semiconductores. También lo que podemos hacer es la producción de heno representa la mayoría del riego en la cuenca del río Colorado. Si nosotros nos enfocamos en la producción de otros productos agriculturales, por ejemplo, agave, por ejemplo, ¿cómo se dice barley en español? ¿Cebada?
Cebada, sí.
O la producción cebada. Por ejemplo, en Arizona tenemos muchos granjeros que están produciendo algodón o que están produciendo maíz, que utilizan mucha agua. Ya hemos hablado con estos granjeros y hemos dicho a ellos, ustedes pueden cambiar de algodón o de naranjas o a producir cebada. Y ellos nos dijeron, no podemos hacer eso porque si nosotros vendemos cebada, solo podemos venderlo para alimentar a vacas y a ovejas. Y porque no hay casas de malta en Arizona para tener cebada y producir cerveza. Entonces lo que tuvimos que hacer es construir una empresa de una casa malta en Arizona para que los granjeros pudieran vender la cebada a una casa de malta para producir cerveza. La misma cosa va a pasar en todas partes aquí, porque si nosotros queremos cambiar de productos agriculturales que utilizan mucha agua a los que sean más eficaces, como el agave, necesitamos más distillerías, ¿cómo se dice? Distillerías para producir tequila. Y vamos a hacer, por ejemplo, hay una planta que se llama guayule, que es una planta para producir goma. Y esta planta puede sobrevivir en el desierto muy bien, no requiere mucha agua, pero no hay plantas para producir goma en muchas partes de Sonora ni tampoco en Arizona. Entonces, si nosotros podemos hacer inversiones para atractar estas empresas, podemos cambiar. Pero si nosotros cambiar de como heno a agave o guayule, una planta de goma, lo que va a pasar es el precio de leche se va a subir.
Eso también es otro tema interesante. Israel, bueno, es un país que invierte mucho en innovación, pero hay otro proyecto aquí. Me parece fascinante esta conexión entre pensar en el sector agrícola y el sector de data centers, ¿no? Como que eso es para un artículo que alguien de aquí tiene que publicar, así que empiezan su investigación.
O si podemos escalar la tecnología para enfriar un centro de datos y aplicar esa misma tecnología a enfriar una planta de energía nuclear, eso va a cambiar el mundo, porque ahora utilizamos billones de litros de agua para enfriar la planta nuclear en Arizona. Si podemos desarrollar una manera que no utiliza agua para enfriar esa planta, eso va a cambiar todo el mercado para agua en la región entera.
De hecho, la empresa que decías, IDE, es una de las principales desaladoras para termoeléctricas aquí en CFE para México y también para Dos Bocas. Es una desaladora.
Sí, mi amiga Letty Turstein es uno de los jefes de IDE. Es una empresa muy impresionante que tiene una tecnología muy avanzada en la desalinización, pero el desarrollo de la desalinización, de la planta de desalinización en Puerto Peñasco, en este momento tiene mucha controversia en Arizona. Por asuntos politicales, porque por algunas razones.
Muy bien, pues la última pregunta y luego vamos a comer canapés.
Muchas gracias. Emiliano López Bernardo, Secretaría de Relaciones Exteriores. Primero que nada, un comentario. Creo que el enfoque que usted da trata mucho el tema agrícola. Sin embargo, creo que varios municipios de México, incluido el del cual yo soy originario, Ensenada, Baja California, sufrimos de problemas de agua para uso doméstico, ya que el agua está siendo encaminada por cuestiones de corrupción, entre muchas otras cosas, a los viñedos del Valle de Guadalupe. Ese sería un primer comentario. Y mi segundo comentario es, con miras a la revisión del Tratado México-Estados Unidos-Canadá, que será realizado el año entrante, me gustaría saber si el Telecam y ahora el TEMEC tienen algún tipo de inciso sobre las cuestiones hídricas entre los tres países, y si sí, qué tipo de estipulaciones se mencionan en el tratado.
Yo no creo.
No, yo creo que no, por lo menos yo no sé.
De que va a ser un tema que van a usar para hacer manita de puerco, sin embargo, claro, van a usar todo. Y yo creo, bueno, esto es mi opinión, Rhett, si me permites,
Sí, claro.
que México necesita fortalecer su postura, porque les puedo decir como chilanga gringa que ante estas amenazas no van a retroceder, van a aumentar las exigencias hasta que te plantas. Entonces, yo creo que estamos llegando muy cerca al momento y esa fecha es el 1 de agosto. Ponen esos aranceles. Mi opinión como mexicana, hay que tomar cartas y hacer algo. No, pero quería decir eso. Gracias.
Yo me
tiene que ver con agua.
Yo me siento muy preocupado que la futura de la relación hídrica entre los dos países se va a como atarse dentro de estos otros asuntos. Y hasta ahora nos hemos comportado como vecinos muy geniales, muy buenos hasta ahora, por lo menos en los asuntos de cómo compartimos el agua. Aunque en el río Colorado no siempre damos tanto agua en el río, pero por lo menos esto porque somos vecinos. Y a veces los vecinos prestan azúcar al otro. Pero me preocupo que en el futuro vamos a como atar todos los asuntos de agua a esos otros asuntos y no sé si eso es una buena idea.
Muy bien. Entendí que hay una más. Ok, sí, claro.
Hola. Hola. Bueno, sí, está bien.
Sí.
Yo soy Carlos Castro. Tengo una empresa de análisis de datos y también doy clases de Machine Learning ahorita. Tengo una pregunta ahorita que mencionó lo de los data centers. No sé qué tan factible sea enfriar más rápido un data center, porque es al contrario, o sea, a comparación de los algoritmos que usábamos hace 10 o 15 años, ahora usan muchísimo más energía. Por ejemplo, generar una imagen equivale a una carga de un teléfono celular. Y creo que la única forma de usar menos energía en un algoritmo es reconfigurando la programación, pero eso no es tan sencillo.
Sí.
Entonces no sé si lo han considerado, pero desde el punto de vista técnico, ahorita que escuché lo de los data centers, creo que es al contrario, o sea, tal vez va a haber más agua para un data center.
Sí, no hay una manera de enfriar los data centers sin utilizar más agua, utilizar más energía. Y tenemos que escoger uno o el otro. Por lo menos para mí, hay muchas formas de energía, pero solo hay una cosa que es agua. Entonces podemos encontrar muchas formas de energía, pero no hay otra cosa que sea agua.
Y a lo mejor renovables es la solución en ese.
Pero la cosa difícil es que muchas de las maneras de producir energía requieren agua. Entonces no hay una forma de cómo desatar la conexión entre los data centers y el agua. Aunque el proceso de enfriar el data center es muy eficaz, en el uso de agua, la energía que está dando poder a este proceso puede utilizar mucha agua, entonces quién sabe.
Bueno, hay muchos problemas que tenemos que resolver, mucha gente joven en este público, entonces manos a la obra. Muchas gracias.
Un placer, muchísimas
Dr.
gracias a ustedes.
Larson, creo que fue